right, y'all, what's the vibe? What are we doing with the TV? What are you guys feeling? Lately I've been doing the Harry Potter ambiance, but I think for you, we'll go back to tried and true Silent Hill. Now I wanted to take advantage of the decor for one last video at least, because I still have it up. It's November 6th, the day I'm filming this video, and I still have my Halloween decor up because it stays up for a long time. Actually, I turn it into Christmas decor. Anyway, I've had this video idea for quite a long time to do my top 5 favorite horror movie directors and my favorite films from each of them. So the first thing I want to acknowledge about this list is while writing it, I realized I selected all male horror movie directors, and I'm not here to claim that there aren't many female horror directors because that's just not true. Are there more male than female movie directors in general? Probably, but usually it is the male directors that get the most attention and acknowledgement and more opportunities, I would say, especially in the horror genre, than women do. Maybe I'm completely wrong in saying that, but because my ignorance is clearly strong and all of my favorite directors are men, and my list is very much lacking of women, I would love for you guys to leave a comment telling me your favorite female, not even horror director, but just favorite female in horror in general. Actor, writer, editor, producer, director, whatever you want to say is your favorite woman in horror. I would love to know because we need some more woman representation on this video, so please leave a comment. So another thing that I want to acknowledge is that my list of directors are considered modern horror directors, and while I love Tobe Hooper and John Carpenter and some of their movies are my favorites of all time, generally, I mean, I didn't grow up with their, watching their work. I do enjoy their work, but a majority of it, I guess I'm not familiar with, if that makes sense. I tend to gravitate more towards modern horror 2000s and newer, and I know that's controversial in and of itself, but that is why primarily I gravitate towards these horror movie directors who are, still going strong, all alive and kicking, and all modern horror creators. So it's all just my personal preference. Just keep that in mind. Also, the movies I choose for each director might be surprising and controversial also, so just keep that in mind. It's all personal preference. Okay, feel free to disagree with me in the comments. So also, before we get into the video, I just want to thank Shudder for sponsoring this video. Shudder is of course a premium streaming service for all things horror, thriller, and suspense. Their collection includes blockbuster hits, horror classics, and original and exclusive content such as their movie Tigers Are Not Afraid and the Creepshow series. On Halloween, I watched the Creepshow animated special that they came out with, and oh my gosh, I'm not really into animated things, I'm not gonna lie. I saw that and I was so disturbed by it. Like, it really got to me, even though the style of animation normally isn't my thing, but it was so good. Very, very creepy. I love Creepshow anyway, so I'm so happy that they're keeping the essence of it alive with their series and the animated special. So I highly, highly recommend checking out the animated special if you haven't yet, because it was amazing. You can stream Shudder completely ad-free on all of your devices, including iOS, Android, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Google Chromecast, all for $5.99 a month or $56.99 per year, or you can go to shudder.com and use my code POSSESSED30 for a free 30-day trial. All right, is it flashing too much? Should I change this again? We're gonna change it again. Haunted, I don't know. Haunted, we could do haunted house, but I was thinking more like forest. Oh, we gotta wait for that. I'm not gonna have that play while I talk. While we wait, grab a drink. Okay, so technically this is more of a list of horror creators than all directors. This also includes their work as a producer and writer in some cases. And one of these guys is actually more of a producer than a director. He's directed a couple things, but mostly a writer and producer. So, okay, we're gonna start with my #1 favorite horror creator, writer, director, producer, literally anything he does I love, and that is Guillermo Del Toro. In case you didn't know, I've talked about him many times on my channel already, and some of his work is my favorite. So yeah, he's my #1 favorite horror director. The rest of these are not in any order, but I had to start with him. Like I said, so much of what he works on I am obsessed with, including video game demos that never get released. which is very annoying. Some of his most famous works include Crimson Peak, Pan's Labyrinth, and Hellboy. I think he's easily one of the best and most creative horror directors of our time. And I recently found out that he actually turned down the chance to direct Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And now I can't stop thinking about what that would have looked like. And fun fact, his favorite personal movie that he has done is The Shape of Water, which is a very strange movie. What he does usually is add a lot of fantasy elements to his movies, which I love. He crosses over kind of the fantasy horror, and Pan's Labyrinth is the perfect example of this. And that is actually one of my favorite movies that he's ever worked on. This is a 2006 movie. I wouldn't even call it a horror movie, but it does have some horror elements. It's definitely more of a fantasy thriller drama kind of movie. And he was the writer and director for this. I think he created some of the most original and creative monsters, I guess, creatures in Pan's Labyrinth that I've ever seen. Another movie that I absolutely love from him that he was the executive producer on is Mama. I've talked about Mama many times. It used to be one of my favorite movies, like top 5 of all time. It's no longer in my top 5, but it's still one of my favorite rewatches. This came out in 2013 and is directed by Andy Muschietti. I'm so bad at pronunciation. And he also directed It and It Chapter 2, the most recent ones. So a lot of people hate on Mama for some reason. I don't know why, because Guillermo Del Toro worked on it, the director of It and It Chapter 2, which is so loved, directed Mama, but so many people crap on that movie so much. I think it's because although it's very scary, it's not consistent through the movie, because towards the end it does get very, very plot heavy and less horrifying. So I understand that. I'm doing a top 3 movies for each director, by the way. So the third movie from Guillermo Del Toro that I love is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that came out last year in 2019. He was a producer and writer for this movie. And again, this is a controversial choice of his, I think, because again, not a lot of people love it. And I think one of the reasons why is because it's rated PG-13. But one of my favorite things about Guillermo del Toro is he can create a horror movie or horror creatures or horror elements in movies that don't require gore or violence, and that is typically why a lot of movies do get R ratings. And I just respect his vision so much that he's able to create very horrifying creatures. I mean, have you seen Scary Stories or Mama? Like, horrifying. I just think his vision works so well in the horror genre without having to create an R-rated movie, and this allows for more people to be able to enjoy his movies. Obviously, I think Pan's Labyrinth was rated R because there are some scenes in that. But also his type of horror is just really effective for me, and that's why he's one of my favorite horror creators. By the way, I think I manifested a ghost. I've had some strange occurrences happening lately. I just heard something moving in the kitchen. I'm not sure what that was. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm posting a bunch of my haunting experiences over there. And I don't even believe in ghosts. I don't. Still don't. All right, next up is a very underrated director in my opinion, and that is Jeremy Solner. His list of work isn't too long, but I definitely think he's a more up-and-coming horror director, writer, producer that we should be keeping an eye out for. And besides the top 3 movies that I'm going to talk about, he also made Murder Party, which I talked about recently in my underrated Halloween movies video, and I've talked about that in the past as well. He is mostly, when he directs a movie, he is also the writer for the movie, so he's very hands-on. It's pretty much entirely his vision. Usually one of these movies is not like that. He's just the director. But my first movie that he's done that is hands down the best movie he's ever done is Green Room. This of course is an A24 horror movie that came out in 2015, and he was the director and writer for this one. So if that doesn't convince you right off the bat that he is a very talented horror creator, he also made 2 other movies that I think are underrated, and I've never heard other people talk about them. However, the other 2 are thriller and drama filled, not so much horror movies. So the next movie that he's done that I really enjoy is called Blue Ruin, which came out in 2013. Again, he was the writer and director. And this is a really good story about vengeance gone wrong, and the pacing is really good throughout, and it's just really entertaining throughout the entire movie, and I love it. And the last movie that I want to give Jeremy Solner a shout out for is Hold the Dark from 2018, which he was actually only the director for. The writer was actually named Macon Blair, which you would recognize. He stars in Green Room and in Blue Ruin as well. So they often work together a lot on projects. He and Solner have worked together on 6 movies in total. So in case you haven't heard of Hold the Dark, it is set in an Alaskan town where children have been being eaten by wolves. So there is this wolf expert that is hired to come into the town to track down this pack of wolves. This one I would describe more as an action drama thriller. It doesn't really cross the line to horror that much. There's like a few elements in there, but it's definitely more of a thriller movie. Just know that before going in. Also, I'm sorry I'm not going too in depth on each movie like I normally do in my lists type videos. It's because I've talked about a lot of these movies already on my channel, and a lot of these people are my favorite people in horror, and so they make a lot of my favorite movies, and a lot of them are very famous already, so I don't need to delve into them too much, and I don't want to make this video super long, so that's why I'm not really delving into each movie specifically. All right, next up we have Leigh Whannell. I finally learned how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry, Leigh Whannell, that I have never gotten it right until this day. For the record, I used to pronounce it Leigh Whannell, so you can laugh now, thank you. So this is the one that I was talking about that's not typically a director, although he has directed some things. He is much more, a lot of his work tends to fall more in the writer section of horror, I guess, and producer and actor. He did direct Upgrade and The Invisible Man and Insidious Chapter 3, however. And usually when he is to direct a movie, he's also the writer on that project. And personally, I love when horror creators get to do this, where they are the writer and director, because it is completely their vision and they get to get their story across exactly how they imagined it. Also, I want to say Leigh Whannell briefly stars in a movie called Raise that no one talks about. I don't think I've ever heard anyone mention that movie. Have I mentioned it? I don't even know. But check it out. It's pretty good. Again, more action, thriller type. It's actually kind of a horror too, I would say. Obviously, #1 movie that he's most famous for, and one of my favorite franchises, is Saw. He was the writer for Saw 1 through 3. He was the executive producer for 2 through 6, Final Chapter, and Jigsaw. And of course, he acted in a lot of these as well. Another franchise that is very famous that he has worked on a lot is Insidious. He was the writer for the first movie, so he and James Wan have worked together many, many times. Lastly, for Leigh, I would say Upgrade, which came out in 2018. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do. It is an action horror movie, and he was the writer and director for this as well. As I mentioned before, he directed it. Next up, we have another underrated one that maybe you haven't heard too much about, or you know his movies, but you don't necessarily know his name, and that is Adam Wingard. He has directed 2 shorts in the VHS series, and the letter Q in ABCs of Death in the first one, and he was also an actor in all of these as well. And his directorial debut was actually when he was 19 years old in 2007, and he made a movie called Homesick that starred Bill Moseley. So he got a great opportunity right off the bat to work with Bill Moseley on his first movie, which is incredible. So movies that Adam Wingard has worked on that are my personal favorite, 2 famous ones for sure you're gonna know: You're Next and Blair Witch. On You're Next, which came out in 2011, he was the director on that. And Blair Witch, the sequel slash remake, whatever you want to call it, it's a sequel. He was the director and co-producer for this. And I think that movie doesn't get enough credit. I rewatched it for Halloween, and it just reminded me how incredible the last 20 minutes of that movie is. Like, it's so good. I've said this before, but if you think the original Blair Witch Project from 1999 is boring, then watch the sequel Blair Witch from 2016, because then you can get the feeling of the movie, but with more action and horror in it. And the last movie that he has done that is so underrated that no one talks about, and I wish I included it in my underrated Halloween horror movies, because it is in fact a Halloween movie, The Guest from 2014. He was the director on this, and this is more of a thriller mystery Halloween movie, so it's not super horrific or anything like that, but it has its elements. It actually stars Maika Monroe, if that's how you pronounce her name, from It Follows, and a lot of this movie kind of reminds me of It Follows if It Follows was a thriller movie instead of a horror movie, if that makes any sense. The plot is completely different, but with the music choices in The Guest, it just feels very It Follows-esque, and it has the same actor in it, so it kind of feels like that too, I guess. All right, are you guys ready for my last favorite horror movie director? Do you want to take a guess before I say it? I'll give you a second. Mike Flanagan. Of course, he wrote and directed the movies Gerald's Game and Hush. Very famous, very popular, very good movies. And I'd say besides Guillermo Del Toro, Mike Flanagan has created the most work that I actually enjoy, which was actually surprising because I didn't know that before making this list for this video. He has a longer list of work anyway, but yeah. Anyway, he's married to Kate Siegel, who also stars in a lot of his work, and they actually co-write some of the projects that he's worked on as well, such as Hush. She was the lead in that, and she co-wrote that movie with him. She of course stars in Haunting of Hill House and Oculus and Gerald's Game. And I found out this video, like me working on this video, made me learn so many fun facts about my favorite horror people. He was actually a voice actor in 2016 for my favorite horror podcast of all time. I listen to it every single day without fail, the No Sleep podcast. He was on an episode in 2016. I didn't even know probably who he was at that time. Also, before you ask, yes, I am watching Bly Manor right now, and it's taken me a minute to get through, guys. I'm sorry. It's just not as good as Hill House. So with Hill House, I finished that really fast, and I never did a video on it actually. But Bly Manor, yeah, it's taken me a second. Sorry. If you want a review, I will review it. It's just been out for so long now. Other people have done their reviews. I don't know if you still want to hear my opinion on that. Maybe I could do one video on Hill House and Bly Manor just to have it out there. Anyway, speaking of Hill House, that is one of my favorite things that Mike Flanagan has ever done, is The Haunting of Hill House, which is obviously based on the book by Shirley Jackson, and this came out in 2018. He was the creator and writer for well, he's the creator of it, but a writer for 4 episodes of Hill House. I don't really need to explain why that's good, and I will save my thoughts on that series for another video if you want that. A more recent movie that he was the writer and director for was Dr. Sleep, which came out last year in 2019. This was, of course, the sequel to The Shining, written by Stephen King. I recently rewatched this actually when I took my trip down to Joshua Tree. They had a projector there, so we watched Dr. Sleep, and that movie is incredible. Like, not a lot, I mean, I guess it's obviously well known, but I still think underrated because a lot of people, again, didn't receive it that well. It was way better than I expected it to be. But I think Dr. Sleep was so well done and so creative. Some of the visuals in that movie are so amazing. I've done a whole review video on it, so I will link it. Any movie in this video that I've done a review for, I'll link in the description box actually. And lastly, one of my favorite movies that he's done that I don't think I've talked enough about on my channel. I might have mentioned it once in a video of a list video, I don't even know, Oculus. This is from 2013, and Mike Flanagan was the writer and director for this as well, and this is such a good movie. It's one of those movies that's just like easy to consume, if that makes sense. You can rewatch it. I rewatch this movie all the time. It's just so easy of a watch. It has just enough horror elements in it, has just enough story in it and suspense in it, and I love the overall concept of Oculus. So if you have not seen that yet, which you probably have, I would definitely recommend checking it out. So there we have my top 5 horror creators. I'm going to call them creators because they don't just direct movies, obviously, and some of their best work in my opinion. I would love to hear your favorite horror creators, especially if they're women. Like I said, we need some more of that representation in here in this video. Please leave a comment. I'm curious if any of my choices surprised you on my list. Maybe you assumed it would be something else, like the director of The Ring, for instance. Nope. Because if you look at his other work, nope. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.